All right, everybody, welcome back to the Learning Out Loud podcast. I'm your host, Dustin William. I have my co-host with me, Whitestone.
I shall now attempt to show how the most important of these principia have been crystallized into the pithy form of maxims and have influenced and developed that grand system of truth known as equity jurisprudence.
The power is neutral. It's sitting in the quintessence until you invoke it. All right, welcome everybody back to the Learning Out Loud podcast. I am your host, Dustin William, owner and producer over at True Life Productions. You can find all of our content over at truelifeproduction.com, including everything about the Learning Out Loud podcast. Just click the banner right up at the top. That'll get you to learningoutloudpodcast.system.io, where you can listen to all of the foundation episodes right there. Click the foundations page, and that'll get you to the first 10 episodes of the podcast completely free. First hour 1 and 2 are completely free, along with all the show notes and transcripts and all that stuff. You can get over there at the foundations landing page. And here we are to episode 11 of the Learning Out Loud podcast, where we are done with our equity series. And speaking of that, let's introduce our co-host Whitestone and get his take on. Let's just do a little recap on the equity series real quick.
Yeah, a little recap on equity.
Yeah,
that was a lot of information. I mean, if you think
absolutely.
about it, it took us 10 episodes and 20 hours to go through the 20 maxims and just the brief history of equity. Just imagine what it would take to do the same thing with 60 million codes and statutes.
No, thank you, dude.
So,
Yeah.
the thing is the more you read equity and you learn to see the world with equity eyes, life actually becomes a lot less complicated. So, the
Mm.
time investment that we put into really kind of digging into equity, I think, is something that everybody should really consider doing the same thing.
Yeah, man, I agree. And which actually, yeah, it was that was a feat, honestly. That was a lot of research, and we talked about it after we were done. And we're like, man, we're actually glad to look into something other than equity for a little bit. Which brings us to what we're gonna start looking into now, which is the Trivium. Which these things are kind of the law and the Trivium are connected because you can't have equity without logical thinking and using the trivium process in your learning. And that's why we both thought it was just a really appropriate spot to go into right after equity because we can learn all these things fine and good, but if we're learning all these subjects and we're not learning how to connect all these subjects, then they're not really doing us any good. So that's what brings us to the trivium, because the trivium isn't just a subject you learn. It's actually another method of life. But this is a method of how you learn anything you want to learn in the world. And it's just another really interesting piece of our history, and it goes back a really long time, actually. The trivium method of learning is, Aristotle was talking about it. It goes all the way back to Hugo. Oh, what was his name? I didn't put him in this episode. I'll probably put him in the next episode, but
It's not Hugo Grotius, is it?
no, it's not Grotius. I can't remember the
Because
guy's
he
name.
shows up everywhere, and there's a reason
Yeah,
for it. But
he does show up. But actually, Joseph Story shows up in our second hour today, which I'm excited to talk about. Because Scalia, the guy we talked about in our last equity, uh, or in the Grupo case, the 1999 Grupo case, he's actually in our second hour. We're going to talk about him a little bit because he wrote a great book called Reading Law: The Interpretation of Legal Text. So if you guys want to learn about that, go over to the uh, the paid portion of the show, and you can get hooked up over there and listen to and find out how the trivium actually does connect to law. Because actually, Anton Scalia, he chose a guy named Brian A. Gardner as his partner to write this book, and he was actually a grammarian, and that's how they break down a lot of the book is through.
did you say Brian Garner?
Yeah, Brian A. Garner.
That is
Yep.
the Brian Gardner is the editor in chief of
Mm-hmm.
Black's Law Dictionary, 11th
Ex
edition.
Yep, exactly. I was, yep.
Okay, so
Yep,
I
yep.
didn't know if you knew that.
Yes, I did. Yeah, which I thought was a very interesting. I didn't learn that until a couple days ago, but I thought that was very interesting. So,
Speaking of which, Brian A. Garner, do you know who a guy was it something Foster Wallace? Um, he
Foster
wrote a
Wallace.
book called
Sounds
Infinite
familiar.
Jest.
Infinite Jest.
Yeah, it's called Infinite Jest. Is it Brian? No, people are going to get mad I'm getting this wrong. But anyway, his middle and last name are Foster Wallace. He and Brian Garner actually teamed up to write a sort of, I think it might be a nonfiction book, and I went and looked at it, and that is another book we should look into.
Oh.
As we're talking about language and the creation of realities through words.
Oh,
Um,
interesting. Yeah, that'll get into symbolism, which is what we're going to talk about a little bit later in this hour. Nice.
yeah, so anyway, I didn't want to pull us off track or anything, but it's just you'll find a lot of these editors and a lot of these authors whenever they team up or whenever they do things, that should also tell you something, is what I was getting at.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And that's why I thought the guy who edited Black's Law Dictionary and Scalia, the guy who gave the Grupo case, and actually another Second Amendment case that we'll just touch on later. I thought that was a very interesting combination for those two to be together because you know how everybody knows how we feel about Black's Law Dictionary. So, um, yeah, anyways, we'll
David, sorry, it's David Foster Wallace. Just wanted to,
David Foster Wallace. Okay.
yep.
Yeah, thank
Look
you.
up his book, Infinite Jest. It's kind of got a cult following. Apparently, it's a pretty difficult read, but for those who have eyes to see, I think you'll see what I'm talking about.
Okay, cool. Yeah, perfect, perfect. All right, so yeah, but that's going to be some second hour content. Before we get there, let's start digging into the trivium. And how we're going to do this is we are actually going to do this first episode here. It's going to be 2 hours on grammar. We're going to do 2 hours on logic, and then we're going to do two hours on rhetoric. So today, this is going to start with the grammar portion of the trivium, but before we get there, we should probably define the trivium, which I find this is it's actually got a fascinating definition to it and etymology to it. So we will start there. And this is actually out of the 11th edition of the Encyclopedia Britannica, which is a very interesting edition of that book also. But um, they define the trivium in the Encyclopedia Britannica in medieval educational system, the curriculum which included grammar, rhetoric, and logic. The trivium and the quadrivium together made up what are known as the seven liberal arts. From the word in its original sense is derived the adjective trivial, that which can be seen at the crossroads, i.e., unimportant. Well, actually, that's interesting. They kind of the reason I got this out of the 11th edition. Oh shoot, I didn't bring the other. Uh, oh shoot, I didn't bring that other one in there. Anyways, but so they kind of make this seem the trivium unimportant and commonplace. That's kind of it seems like that's what they're saying, but trivium actually means where three roads meet. That's what the etymology is the crossroads. But in the 11th edition of the Encyclopedia Britannica here, they're kind of trying to make it seem unimportant, commonplace. Is that how you're reading that right there?
Yeah, that kind of threw me off because once it got to it's derived from the adjective trivial, which, I mean, common use of that word does mean small, unimportant, not really worth paying attention to.
Right,
Um,
but the reason right, and so the reason I'm bringing this up is because, and the reason I say the Encyclopedia Britannica 11th edition is very interesting is because it's another one of those books that is meant for the upper echelon. And yeah, the whole 11th edition of the Encyclopedia Britannica, it's very interesting. I dig into it a lot. But I think that's very interesting that they put that there. But the actual reason that the word trivium is associated with the word trivial is because, oh, did I?
I wonder if it's because it's very commonplace amongst the higher echelons to have had that learning, and it's not really that special because everybody has it.
Well, it was they were actually arguing over like terms of the like in the trivium in quadrivium. It was over like terms within the definitions of these two liberal ways of arts, and they were basically like, this is a trivial argument. That's where the
Oh,
word trivial came from. It's like this is trivial. It's just, it doesn't matter. It's all encompassing in the trivium, so this is a trivial argument.
I
It
see.
was really, yeah, yeah. It was always a way of like meant to distract from the main point. So, but yeah, I just thought that was a very interesting little point
Oh,
right
I
there.
see. Like maybe perhaps it's like, oh, I see what you're doing. You're using a system of thinking to try to win. That doesn't matter.
Right. Yeah. It's like, yeah, it was it just I wish I would have I thought I put that in here. Man, I'm so mad at myself that I didn't do that. But maybe is did I put because I did look it up. Maybe it's in the etymology.
Well, while you're looking for that, I will say that in my version, if we're talking about a system that was perfected during the medieval times, the version of the Trivium that I have actually has depictions. This one is from 1185, and then there's another one from the 1600s, and they depict. I should have uploaded this. Maybe I can do that after. But the
Yeah.
trivium and the quadrivium are known as the seven liberal arts, and they have a graphic here, and it looks very zodiacal, almost like the way the zodiac is lined out, where you have each one of the aspects of the quadrivium or the trivium have their own arch that they're standing in, and it's represented by a person or a deity that kind of represents those qualities. And each one of those seven spheres is around a central sphere where there's a lot of Old English and things in there too. So as a system of learning, this really was taken very seriously, and it was seen
Hmm.
as foundational to the ways that human beings communicate and reason and persuade. Because if you think about, there's the art of the sword and there's the art of the word. And if you want
Hmm.
to avoid war and you want to move towards peace, you got to learn how to reason, communicate, and persuade. And I think that was maybe a big reason they used
Yeah,
a
well,
lot of it.
yeah, it was literally called persuasive rhetoric. That's what
Yeah.
yeah. So yeah, which is actually the third part of the trivium. And but so I couldn't find what I was looking for, but that's fine. But my whole point here is what the trivium actually means is it's where three roads meet. That's the etymology of the trivium, and it is a medieval system of education. And people did used to take this very seriously, and that's why it was removed from our education system because we did used to teach this in America at one point in time. But then that is not so anymore. And now so much to the point where people don't even know what the word trivium is when you say it to them. You can't even hold a conversation with them because they've never even heard
They
this.
think it's a
So
classic rock band,
right, yeah,
which it
literally,
is. It is, but
right, right. But yeah, and maybe that was on purpose to
yep.
cover up what this actually is because what this actually is not it's a system of learning. This is basically the keys to the kingdom. This is what teaches you how to learn any subject you want to learn. And the first part of that is the grammar part. So, and this is out of the Trivium, the Liberal Arts of Logic, Grammar, and Rhetoric by um, Sister Miriam Joseph, PhD. And you can get this book on Amazon. You just look up uh, that exact name right there. It'll pop up on Amazon, whatever you look for. And that's the book I'm using. You're actually using a different book to reference, right?
Yes, I'm using the Trivium from the Wooden Books series.
Okay.
Um, the Wooden Book series used to be something entirely different than what the current renditions are, but a lot of the information in the current ones is still there. It's modernized. Probably not as great to read. So if you can get your hands on older copies, you should do it. But yeah, as far
Yeah.
as the one I'm using is the Wooden Book series.
Okay. Okay. So yeah, just to let everybody know, we are using two different source points here, but But the fact remains the same as these are the first foundational the three parts of the seven liberal arts, and we're going to talk about grammar today. So, and then this is from page 47, chapter 3, general grammar. And what they're talking about here is there is actually two different types of grammar. And general grammar is concerned with the relation of words to ideas and realities, whereas special grammar, such as English or Latin or French or Spanish grammar, is concerned principally with the relation of words to words. So, in I'm just going to read my notes that I put down here because I was actually just looking at this morning. So, general grammar is the more philosophical of the two types, being more closely connected with logic, and because of this, it does differ from special grammar. Meaning relating words to words based on the structure of language may give you a different answer than relating those words to nature. And that's what general grammar is, as we just stated. General grammar is relating the words to nature and reality, and special grammar is like the structure of language. So, from how I understand it, you actually go from specific to general in this sense. You have to have your concrete structure of how these words relate to each other in the special grammar. Then you can relate those related words to nature and form the understanding of the world around you. And this is kind of how I like understand how this is how people get like different dialects in their language in different reasons is by the relation of their general grammar to the nature around them. And then, so special grammar is basically the structure of how general grammar works in the language. Everyone has agreed upon customs, not only by language, but dialects can also vary by region, but by agreement between them. But a parts of speech is what makes special grammar and gives you the ability to communicate not only within our own culture, but also between cultures as we translate and identify each other's parts of speech, such as like nouns, adjectives, numbers, and genders. And that is what special grammar is. So, do you have anything you want to add to that, Whitestone?
No, I just want to mention that English, at least in this book here, it's saying that English is the result of Latin kind of filtering out over the world throughout the years. It's actually a mix of, what to say, Latin, Greek, and I think German and French. But
Okay.
what it is saying is that English is basically a dialect of Latin. That's what this book says, which is I find kind of interesting.
Yeah, that is interesting, and that's probably true, and that's actually what grammar used to mean when the words first started being used. Grammar used to mean the study of Latin.
Yeah.
So, yeah, there's something about Latin for sure. It'd be fun to look into the origins of it. Actually, I
Well,
never
I mean,
have.
it says when the classical Latin disappeared, all of the dialects of Latin actually became all of the Romance languages.
Oh, okay. I mean, that
And
makes
so
sense.
and that's really interesting too, that, the mother of the Romance languages is Latin. And so if you think about, the romantic languages and when they're spoken, kind of the effect that they can have on the ears and everything else, and the mother of all that being Latin, and we know who it's tied to, that's just a whole other, I think a whole other stream we could go down.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. There's something special about Latin, and they always like to claim it's a dead language, but I mean, that's
Well,
I
it's
I read
interesting
it every
because
day, so.
literally, because now if you are on the side of being dead or being, incorporated, you're a dead entity, you are going to use Latin, the rules of Latin, because it's for the dead. It's a language for the dead. It's a dead language.
Oh, oh, that's an interesting point there. Yeah, maybe that's,
Yeah, and
oh,
it's like,
nice.
there's the language of the living and there's a language of the dead. And I think they say it's a dead
Oh, that's
language.
so, what's sorry, I don't mean to cut you off. It just
No, you're
came
right.
back to me. That's how Catholic priests communicate with demons too,
Yes,
is
it's all
through
through Latin.
Latin. Yeah. So, wow. Yeah. Yeah. Wow. Okay. Yeah. That
So
just
it
put a whole
makes
new
you think
perspective
that
on
if
that for me.
if all of our well, English, for example, I'm trying to find the see, yeah, modern English thus emerged as a hybrid language, about 28% Latin, 28% French, 25% Germanic, which included Saxon, Dutch, and Norse, 6% Greek, 4% proper names, and 6% from elsewhere. So,
Hmm. Interesting. Yeah, that's super interesting. Um, did you get cut off?
no, I'm all right.
Oh, sorry. Okay. I thought you were going on there. Anyways, so we will so yeah, I just wanted to touch on like what general and special grammar are because that's what we're talking about now. So now we're going to kick it back to all the way back to Aristotle. And this is from Aristotle's categories. And what he's talking about here is basically he's relating what we just talked about, and we're going to talk about it through the lens of how nature is structured and how they've named things in nature. So, because this is a quote from Aristotle's categories. It says, in from section one, it says things are said to be named equivocally when, though they have a common name, the definition corresponds with the name corresponding with the name differs for each. Thus, a real man and a figure in a picture can both lay claim to the name animal, yet these are equivocally so named. For though they have a common name, the definition corresponding with the name differs for each. For should any one definition in what sense each is an animal, his definition in the one case will be appropriate to that case only. So that is some very old fancy language for basically saying, well, we'll just look at the definition of equivocal now. Equivocal is having two or more possible meanings. He responded to the reporter's questions with equivocal answers. That's an example. And the number two definition of that is not easily understood or explained. So when things are named equivocally, like so we are both animals, you can call, as he gives the example here, a dog and a human are both animals, but there is no distinction between them when things are named equivocally. So we now we're going from general to more specific.
Can I make a
When
point on that real quick?
Yeah, absolutely.
So when it's talking to, basically what they're saying is that you can have two different things that have the exact same name, like a category. Like you can have two different animals, but if you say animal, how are we going to know which one is differentiated from the other one? And that boils down to how it is that we define the term. And so,
Yes.
based on the common understanding of what animal is, we'll be able to pick and choose, or we'll be able to understand which one that we're talking about. And then we get more specific, like dog and animal. Um, it just reminds me of the current state that we're in with our name, where we have a name, which is an all caps name, which really looks the same as our normal name. They're equal,
Mm.
but depending on how you define each one is going to differentiate which name belongs to who.
Oh, well, that's a great point because we definitely make a distinction between the all caps name a lot.
Yeah, because it seemed to be like, it's a common thing, it's just spelling. It's
Hmm.
not, there's no difference.
Yeah, that's your name, but which one of your names is it?
Yeah, which one of your names is it, and how are you
Yeah.
defining that name
That's a very interesting
in
point.
terms of,
And
where it comes from, what it's subject to, and that whole thing. So anyway, I just wanted to, this stuff goes all the way back to Aristotle, which
mhm.
means, that this thing that we're living under, if you just want to use the name for example, people have known about this for 2,000 years
Yeah,
at least.
absolutely. And it's actually even before Aristotle because Aristotle was just philosophizing on the trivium. So this was
Yeah,
already around, you know?
yeah. So this is very, very old, old information. It's been around for a very, very long time. So anyway, I just wanted to tie that back into why it's important to study grammar and how we can apply it, to kind of our modern day existence.
Yeah, absolutely. That's a great point. Yeah, because if people were learning classically and understanding the words that they're reading on the page, they may ask that question, which name are you talking about? But, as far as everybody knows, they only have one name right now. So, Now we're going from more general to a little more specific in the same literature from Aristotle's categories. On the other hand, things are said to be named univocally, which have both the name and the definition answering to the name in common. A man and an ox are both animal, and those are univocally so named, inasmuch as not only the name, but also the definition is the same in both case. For if a man should state in what sense each is an animal, the statement in the one case would be identical with that in the other. So basically, so we'll read the definition of univocal, having only one meaning. So basically, what he's stating here is once you name things univocally, you can start to make distinctions between one and the other. So, like the all caps name or the Christian name. So, we're moving away from general into the specific. Once you first give a specific name to an object, you can then give the particular object a particular definition, further building the grammar of any particular subject you are to study. This is the essential precursor to logic. So, we're building on these steps one at a time. And then we get to things that are named derivatively. Things are said to be named derivatively, which derive their name from some other name, but differ from it in termination. Thus, the grammarian derives his name from the word grammar, and the courageous man from the name courage. So now Aristotle has kept building upon the original concept. First, you must name the thing, then you must define the thing. Now the root has taken hold. You can now build your language on top of these first two steps. We'll just cover the definition of derivation because that's what derivatively comes from. Derivation, then derivatively, is the origin of a word. So when things are named derivatively, you already have your common definitions, and then you are building on top of that to be more and more specific. So, you got anything you want to add to that?
No, no. I'm just fascinated with
Okay.
grammar.
Yeah, man.
Well,
No, it is
I
real.
want to say about the word about derivatively, it derives, like it comes from it. Like you
Exactly.
derive an apple from a tree. So when he's talking about everything taking root, you have to think like the whatever the name is, the agreed upon definition is the set thing, and then from there you can have further descriptive words. Like if the root word is courage, we go into courageous. Courageous
Yes.
would be like a branch off of the whatever the mother word would be. So yeah, derived basically means it comes out of. It's secondary. Like the law is derived from equity.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. That's yeah, a direct connection there. Yeah, it's a derivation of the law is a derivation of equity. Yeah. Yeah, that's a great point. So those are how when we go through and we're communicating with each other and we're going through nature and naming things, this is how things get named. They first get named equivocally, and then they get named univocally, and then you have enough grammar to start naming things derivatively, and that is building your foundation of language right there. So now we're going to go back to the trivium and we're going to talk about the function of language. So the function of language is threefold: to communicate thought, volition, and emotion. So, animals communicate by interjection. Humans can go beyond interjection and use full sentences to communicate. So, like interjection is like an animal communicates, like a dog barks. He's interjecting it wherever he can, and that's the only way he can communicate. So, and this is a quote from the Trivium: desires multiply as knowledge increases. Humans usually express their desires, choices, and commands in sentences. Because humans are the only beings on the planet that can not only form sentences, but also think, they alone have language in the proper sense of the word. This gives us a means of communication that is more than just physical, unlike animals. Because we're able to expand our means of communication, this makes us rational and therefore have something to say. Making us social creatures, therefore, we have someone to say these things to. This is a simple distinction in what sets us apart from other animals on the planet. And then this is another quote from the Trivium that I thought was very interesting. Pure spirits such as angels, communicate thought, but their communication is not properly called language because it does not employ a physical medium. So they're not even debating on whether angels exist or anything like that. They're telling us exactly how spirits communicate with us, and they don't
Yeah,
have a
they're
physical
not
medium.
they're not denying that they communicate. They're just clarifying what type of language they're using.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, which I thought was very interesting. I love that. Yeah, you got anything you would like to add to the function of language?
Well, I will just say that, in Genesis in the Bible, one of the first things that Adam did was started to name all of the creatures.
Oh yeah. Yeah, that's a great yeah, that's a great point. You got to put the grammar on the world. Huh. Okay. So that gets us into the basic functions of language. And so what does language actually do? So, and then still in the trivium here, we're going to move on to means of communication. There are possibly only two modes of communicating ideas through a physical or material medium, by imitation or by symbol. And that is from, what was that, page 13 of the Trivium, and of my copy of the Trivium. So we first get into imitation. And imitation is what most people would think of as art, i.e., a painting, a statue, a play, or any other form of one thing reflecting something found in nature. An imitation is an artificial likeness. In my opinion, imitation is actually a more powerful form of communicating emotion, as art can actually reach the subconscious of a human, stir emotions we aren't even aware we had. Um, yeah, you got anything you would like to add to that before we move on to symbolism?
Imitation. I mean,
Yeah.
if you think about it, that really is how children learn initially, is they imitate because they don't understand, the meaning or the history, the context, or, the application of the word. It's not until they use the word or they hear the word enough to associate it with something where now it's actually got a non-physical feeling and an understanding, and then they can start to communicate that way. And so, yeah, really, in order to learn something, you really can only start by imitating.
And yeah, that's an interesting point you bring up there with children too, because in next week's show we're going to talk about. Have you ever heard of the Lost Tools of Learning by Dorothy Sayers?
No, I have not.
So I think she was a professor or something, and she gave this speech at Oxford where she talks about the trivium and how it's such a travesty that we've lost it over time and that it's not in our education system anymore. And she talks about in there how children actually go through the three stages of the trivium as they're growing up, and she talks about how children are in the grammar stage until about age 10 or 11, and then you can start teaching them the logic stage on everything they've learned through their grammar stage growing up, and then by about 16 they're about ready to start learning logic. So yeah, it's right along those lines of how children learn. Yeah, that's exactly right. I'll send you over the Lost Tools of Learning. There's an audio of it. She read it and stuff. It's very interesting to listen
Well, I
to it.
mean, I think there's definitely a reason. I mean, it's not like we accidentally lost the trivium or the quadrivium,
No,
or our
it wasn't an
education
accident.
system is accidentally slipped. Because here, I mean, the thing is, like, language is humanity's primary vehicle for thought and communication, like both internal and external. And what's interesting is in my version of the trivium, it says, Indeed, the ability to learn the complex system of symbols and rules which underlie syntax and grammar is arguably the most distinctive feature of the human race." And so,
Mm.
if we're not teaching young people or people at all how to grammar, how to rhetoric, how to logic, how to
Yeah.
anything, then the most distinctive feature of the human race is not present, which is why people get treated like animals.
I mean, yeah, and we see it in everyday life, man. People, especially the more and more I learn the trivium method of learning, you can just see how it's not present in people. People can learn particular subjects very well. I'm not saying people aren't smart. People are very smart. They can learn subjects, but what they're missing is the trivium, and they're not learning. They remember that subject, but they don't remember how they learned that subject because everything is so piecemeal and disconnected, and that's not an accident. Because if you're not able to connect these dots, then you're much easier to control. And that's what it really fundamentally boils down to. That's why this system of learning was taken out of our education system because you can't connect the dots without these tools of learning. And the most fundamental part of that is the building block of it is the grammar part that we're talking about today. And one of my favorite parts of talking about grammar is a part of grammar is actually symbols, which are a very, very powerful form of communication. So, a symbol is an arbitrary, sensible sign having a meaning imposed on it by convention. Sensible not meaning it would be most appropriate thing for the situation, but as it can as you can perceive it with your senses, as it's you sense it with all of your senses. So I find the convention aspect of symbols very interesting. Depending on the convention of the communicator, depend on the transmission of the communication. What this aspect of grammar and communication most makes me think of are alchemical woodcuts. And I put one of them right here because this is one of the most interesting pictures that you can look at, in my opinion. And you know what this picture is, right, Whitestone?
Yeah, so that has a lot of celestial and zodiacal encoding in it. You've got Plotomy there underneath, kind of looking up at the new model. And she's holding the scales, and one model is heavier and one model is lighter. And it's kind of the showing the difference between the geocentric system and the heliocentric model.
Yes, yes. And the more you look at this thing, the more you can pull out of it. Because I mean, and the reason I bring this point up is because, and what the reason one of my favorite things to talk about is symbolism, is because the average human being would just look at this picture and be like, oh, that's a pretty picture. That's cool. It's got stars. This dude's got eyes on him. But then once you start digging into the history of these things, and do you remember where this was from? This was oh shoot, who made this? What book was this on? Do you remember?
No, I don't remember. I should. Like I said, I've got it actually hanging up in my house.
Yeah.
But
Well, there's go ahead.
it's a form of communication. I mean, because the thing is, at school, we're taught that communication is either spoken or the written word. But, when you look at pictures like this, there's a lot going on there. There's things where there shouldn't be things, and they're
Hmm.
placed very deliberately. And that should tell you that it's not to be looked at in a general or normal sense. They're trying to tell you something else.
Yeah,
And so when you look at, like in this picture, where the light is, where the dark is, what's in the light and what's in the dark. She's holding up two scales. One of them is obviously heavier.
yeah.
What does that entail? Look at where their eyes are looking, look at where they're pointing to. There's Latin phrases on there. So, I mean, you could spend a long time going through and piecing all of this together to figure out what it is they're trying to tell you without using words.
Yeah, yeah, and one thing I will just touch on that to just disambiguate it for everyone a little bit, and one they'll be able to understand the most easily, I think, is like Whitestone said, these two things right here, these two circles right here that are on the scales, that's what this is a scale of justice. And there's a lady holding it. So if you know anything about symbolism and you know anything about scales, scales always mean they're weighing something. And right here, they're not weighing gold, they're not weighing silver. What they're weighing right here is ideas, okay? And what they're trying to tell you is that through their research and interpretation, they are giving more weight to this idea of the solar system than this idea of the solar system. They're saying this is a more plausible idea of the solar system than this one. And this is actually the solar system on the left is actually the one that we use today. That everything rotates around the sun in a nice fancy circle and everything's hunky dory. But how things are more closely accurate is the Earth is right. Or wait, is that the Earth right there? Or is that yeah? The sun is right
Yeah,
here.
the one on the left is the heliocentric model.
Correct.
You
Yeah.
can see the sun at the center and Mercury and Venus, and then right outside of that, you've got kind of the trajectory of the Earth and its moon. And I
Yes.
believe that to the bottom right, like where her foot is next to that shield, I believe that's Ptolemy's. model that was close because he can be seen.
Oh, the geocentric, but still on a globe, right?
Yeah,
Yeah, okay, right, right. Yeah,
I
and then
think.
I'm pretty sure you're right about that, yeah, because that looks like a globe, and then you can see in here it's more it's like a it's flat. If we could zoom in here more, you could see that it's more like a flat Earth, and then it's saying that the planets go around in these more intricate circles, and that Mercury and Venus actually rotate the moon instead of Earth, and then the sun
No,
goes
that's the
around
sun.
Earth
There,
or
it's
the
showing that
sun.
Mercury and
Sun. Yes,
Venus.
that's what I meant.
Yeah,
Yeah,
Mercury and
sorry.
Venus are going around the sun, almost like the sun has moons, and then the sun is going around the Earth, and then I believe, yeah.
And then that's
What's
Saturn,
interesting,
isn't it? Yeah.
I think so, yeah. And
Yeah.
you know what you mentioned also about her holding the scales. So you have a woman holding the scales. Zodiacally, that means the scales in the zodiac. But it contrasts that with what we see in our system where they say, oh, justice is blind and they've got a blindfold on. Here we have a woman holding scales, both of her eyes open, looking up to the light.
Oh, that is a great point. Yeah, justice is not
So
blind here,
she's literally looking with equity eyes. There's no sort of filter or anything else. They put both of the subjects in question on the scales. They hold it up underneath the light and they look up for the answer.
right? Yeah, exactly. Man, isn't that so interesting? Like the sun is like pouring into that thing. Do you know what that thing is that he's holding?
No, it's interesting because it's in his left hand, um, and the sun is the sun rays are basically going through it on top of his left kneecap where there's an eye.
Which would be a
But if you
zodiacal sign.
notice
I
that
can't
the
remember.
light of the sun is going into that device, but there's a greater light up at the top.
That he's pointing to. Yes.
Yeah, that he's basically pointing to.
Yes. And there's some
So
Hebrew up there. I can't remember what these words mean, but
no,
uh,
at some point I had them, but I don't have them right now.
but yeah, what he's saying is there's a sun behind the sun, and then but the sun we see is somehow pouring into this thing. I wish I knew what this was that he was holding right there.
Yeah, it almost looks like I don't know, maybe a telescope or something.
But yeah, and it's going into an eye on his knee too.
Yeah, so I mean, for those that are listening, the man on the left has got eyes all over his body, and I think that's a reference to the thousand eyes.
Hmm. Yeah, I think
Um,
so.
I'm not sure. I mean, I would have to. There's so much that you can pull out of this, but just from going through and looking at these aspects and trying to piece them out and seeing how they relate to others, without reading any words on here,
Yeah,
even
we
with the
haven't
lat
read
that's
one
on here,
word.
yeah, we're able to basically start to piece together what it is that they're telling us, and we didn't read a single word. So
Yeah,
that's how powerful,
symbolism
and something
is.
else we're going to get into is word order. What words mean and in what order they are sometimes, well, often will dictate, um, whether according to logic or some arbitrary construction, it will dictate what the meaning of that sentence is. And it's the same with symbols, that when symbols are placed accordingly, in close proximity to one another, or in a certain order. If you know those symbols, you'll be able to figure out what it is that they're telling you, and it's no different in this picture.
Yeah, yeah, and a big reason why I wanted to get so deep into symbolism is because these power structures that we deal with today, this is how they communicate with each other. This would have been a very common way to communicate when because I'm pretty sure this was a cover of a book or something like that, and it was in like this, wasn't like the 15 or 1600s, or was it the
I thought so.
1700s? I
I
can't.
know the image is old.
Yeah, it's old. Yeah, it's old, hundreds of years old. And it would have been a more common way to communicate with people, but like I was saying before, now we see people see it and they're like, "Oh, that's a pretty picture." And they can't even look into it anymore because they're not even aware that there are two theories to the solar system and how it works. So they wouldn't even
No, and if
understand
they've
what
never
these two
been
things here are here.
if they've never been taught to think and they've never been taught how words and symbols, because that's really all a letter and a word is, they're just symbols, and we've given them meaning.
Yes.
And when those symbols are in a certain order and they make a particular word, even though another word might contain the same letters but in a different order, it means something entirely differently. And what better way to communicate if you're one of the elite than through complex symbolism like this rather than words? Because you can have this stuff circulate all day long, people aren't going to figure it out. But if you were to write
Hmm.
it down, they're going to read it.
Yeah, yeah,
So
absolutely, absolutely.
this, symbolism is a much better way to communicate complex ideas over time rather than words because those definitions change. But
Yep. Yeah, absolutely. And we'll start getting a little bit deeper into symbolism here. So you can have a sign from nature, such as smoke being the sign of fire, or you can have a sign by convention, like a stop sign or a bathroom sign. By convention or arbitrary agreement, symbols are devised that are either temporary or permanent. Temporary signs adopted by a football team, school team, colors, stuff like that. Very conventional stuff that you see out, like road signs or well, okay, well, so yeah, these are more ephemeral things, and then like stuff that you're gonna see like governmental symbols and stuff like that, chemical formulas, the periodic table, stuff like that. These symbols that we just saw on this picture, these are permanent symbols. All of the planet symbols here, permanent and created by specialization. So yeah, and then we'll get into special symbols are designed by experts to express with precision ideas in a special field of knowledge. Common symbols or words such as French, German, Chinese, or Greek words constitute the common language. Special symbols are very interesting to me. In the Trivium, it is stated that these symbols are created by experts and internationally known, but I believe this is too narrow of an approach of this concept. I agree that the special symbols of the time are probably created by experts, but I do not, oh, the special symbols are probably created by experts pretty much all the time, but I do not agree that they have to be internationally known. You might say are different languages of symbols, just like there are different languages between countries. For instance, Freemasonic symbology is intended to be internationally known because is not intended to be internationally known because then it would be actually lose its effect. If a special symbol is intended for a specific audience and presented in a public way as a piece of art, it could likely make one wonder if there are perhaps two worlds operating simultaneously. So that basically, um, I really, because you have a Freemasonic Bible, right, Chris? Whitestone?
well, sorry, I was going to say,
Yeah.
well, what you just read is that if a special symbol is intended for a specific audience and presented in a public way as a piece of art, it could likely make one wonder if there are perhaps two worlds operating simultaneously, which there are.
Hmm.
And unfortunately, both of those worlds use the same words, but they both have different definitions. And so that's why we say there's two worlds going on simultaneously because you can read one sentence one way if you're using one dictionary, but if you're using another dictionary for those exact same words, you're going to come to a completely different conclusion.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely.
And that's really, I
Absolutely.
mean, that kind of just goes back to the equity and law series that we did, talking about the importance of how words are used. You mentioned real quick here about common symbols or words such as French, German, Chinese, or Greek words constitute the common language.
Hmm.
Um, so in my version of the Trivium, it actually likens English to very much Chinese, where it
Really
says, yeah, it says
interesting.
modern English thus emerged as a hybrid language, and it gives the percentages of Latin, French, and Germanic. It continues today to absorb and transmit words, and its grammar and pronunciation remain in flux. It now functions primarily through the combination of predominantly inflexible words, much like Chinese. This
Huh.
book here has actually made two or three references to the English language and the Chinese language, um, kind of built on the same engine in terms of what their function and design is.
Hmm. Yeah, that's so interesting. I've never
Because
heard.
there's two
Chinese and
different
English equated like that.
like two different types of scripts, right? There's logographic systems, which try to depict the meaning of a text without relating to the sound. And it says the Chinese script being a prime example. Because what you have are a series of symbols, and you're not looking at those symbols and trying to figure out how does that symbol um, make a sound. You know, like when we see an
Right.
H or a Z or a G, we know what sound to make. But Chinese script, when they see a symbol, it's more of meaning rather than like phonetic or
Right,
phonographic.
right.
So
Yeah.
that's a logographic system. Phonographic systems, on the other hand, record text as it would sound when spoken. The Roman alphabet, which we use to write English and other Western European tongues, is phonographic, as are the scripts used for Hebrew, Russian, Greek, Arabic, and Sanskrit. Um, but it's just interesting that they're making references that English is becoming more and more um, a logographic sort of language similar to Chinese, where there's not a whole lot of inflection or anything like that. It's like a, see here,
Yeah,
yeah. But then
that's so
basically,
interesting. Yeah.
the it I don't know, I could go off on a tangent that I think English is an engineered language for a very specific purpose, and I think a lot of world languages are like that.
Yeah.
Um, and
Yeah.
it's just, when you look at what it is that's going on in China with the types of social machinery that are being doled out, and what they're trying to do over here. And then this book is also making references to the language systems being used for similar reasons or having similar applications. It just makes me wonder.
I've never really gotten a chance to dig into that too much, but I've always had the hunch that that is true, and especially because they're always trying to make. You remember when we were kids, there was like a real push to make English the universal language. Do you
Oh
remember
yeah,
that?
I do remember where you English was now everywhere.
Yeah, and there was like a real push to like push all other languages out. I remember that as a kid.
Yep.
And I always thought it was very strange, but now looking into this stuff, it makes sense. And I do believe English was an engineered, like there's some people that argue that like the English symbols that we use as the letters is actually the oldest language in the world. But I would really have to look into that to get into it because they say it comes from like the Bach saga or something like that. I think there's some connection there. Have you ever heard of the Bach saga?
I have heard of the box saga. I have not had a chance to get into it.
Yeah, I haven't gotten into it too deep, but I've heard there's a connection between the languages there, and the Bach Saga is like it's supposedly the oldest story on the planet, and it was passed down orally for a long time or whatever. It's a huge thing. Maybe we could do an episode on it one day.
Oh
But
yeah, I think we should.
yeah. Anyways, not to get off on too much of a tangent, just to finish what I have on common symbols. Um, so common symbols or words are different and intended for a wider audience. They generally consist of what we know as a common language, English, French, German, aspects of the common language. So they can either be native or foreign. So you either have your foreign language, that's obviously the one you learn first when you're born, and then you can learn native languages. And then there are also living and dead languages, which we touched on a little bit earlier. And dead languages, it may be serviceable for special use, such as liturgy or doctrine. And the reason, yeah, right. And the reason that is because the meanings and interpretations of the words will never change. This is why we use Latin for everything scientific or legal. So that makes me wonder how long has Latin been a dead language? We've been using it to name things since the 1800s. Do you have any hunch on
Well,
that?
I the thing is the reason that they use Latin is like for the reasons you said is because the
Hmm.
meaning of the words never change, and they have not changed for as long as Latin has been around. And
Hmm.
so when we look at how Latin is applied to, like, let's say, the system of control that we live under, that means that that system of control, which is primarily probably based in Latin, has been around for a really really long time.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, when I read this, I was like that because I've always heard that, and I've always heard Latin as a dead language, even though we use it all the time. So I'm like, I really want to look into the history of Latin because the more I look into the Trivium and everything, really, I'm like, man, Latin is just at the center of it. There's something about this language that they like. I don't know. There's something to it.
Well, it makes me think, when Jesus gave Peter the keys to the kingdom, and then he turned around and gave it to the Pope, and then, he turned around and gave it to Charlemagne, which is the lineage, right?
Yeah, correct. Yep.
Okay,
Yep.
so what it makes me think, it's like, well, if the Pope got the keys to the kingdom from Jesus, why did the church eventually migrate towards creating dead entity, dead corporations, and controlling them with Latin?
Right. Just a
If
whole
you
lot of
got the
death going
keys,
around, man.
if you got the keys to the kingdom from Jesus, what are you doing creating this dark world with dead entities and creating them with the language you apparently use to communicate with demons? It just makes me wonder, are these trustees really acting in good faith, or is there something else going on here?
Or is there a breach of trust happening? I've always actually,
Yeah.
I'm going to write
Or
an
they're like,
essay.
well, technically, you didn't say we couldn't create our own world and control that, so we're going to do it through, you know, dead entities, the all caps name, birth certificates,
Yeah,
baptism.
they created a world they are gods over, is what they
Yep.
did. Yep.
And that's their language and their language that they can
hmm
impose. So,
Yeah. Yeah, which it gets us right into our next point here, which is the nature of language. It is the nature of language to communicate through symbols. Words are constituted of two parts, just like every other physical object. We perceive the first part being form and the second part being matter. Matter and form are metaphysical concepts necessary to philosophical understanding of any material whole, for together they constitute every such whole. And we're still reading out of the Trivium here. That is from page 15 of the copy that I have. So the matter of language, the matter of the word is the sound. What words are you actually saying, and how do they sound? And the form of language, the form of the word is their meaning, and it's treated as semantics. Um, so we'll get into the matter of language here. The capacity of the articulate voice to produce such modifications in almost limitless varieties. The matter of language is the actual sound that we make with our mouths when communicating. This simple aspect of the building blocks is what sets us apart from other animals, much like the opposable thumb. Our ability to articulate an almost endless amount of sounds is what makes us able to grow and build as a species. Something I was unaware of, but I found infinitely interesting, is that the English language is missing three vowels and three consonant sounds. So it's missing the two German vowel sounds, Grun and Sean, and French Seol, and it's missing a German consonant.
ich,
Oh,
ich,
eek, eek.
ich,
Okay, and
ich.
Scottish lock. And oh, I missed the third consonant. Oops, apologize for that. Um, but yeah, I just thought that was interesting that we were just touching on this, how we think English is a dumbed down language, and guess what? It's missing three vowels and three consonants.
Yeah, and it's
Thanks.
also not there's not the masculine and the feminine aspect when you're
Yeah,
referring,
it's not
to
gendered. Yep.
either men or women. It's just, in other languages, when you like German, for example, when you're speaking to somebody that is, maybe a little higher in status or somebody that you respect, you're going to use the word you when speaking to them, but it's a different version of that word versus if you're going to be speaking to somebody that, is more of a friend or a casual relative or something. If you're going to use the word you, like, how are you? It's going to be a completely different word because that word indicates the relationship between you and that person, or you're acknowledging the fact that they are male or female. There's a lot in that language, and English simply just does not have that.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. I think the degendering of language is a big deal of our
Yeah, and
language. Yeah.
is that tied into, what we go through on a daily basis now?
Yeah, I mean, it's gotta be because the more I study language, the more I realize the importance of having gendered languages because it makes everything so much more
Yep.
specific. Just these
Because
little
if the
sounds.
language, if the function of language is to convey meaning or to interact or persuade, you would think that that language is also going to have an effect on the way that you interact in the world. And if it's completely sterile, you might just find yourself adopting sterile ideologies because it's reinforced in the language.
I,
You know what I mean?
absolutely,
It's like I'm not a this,
absolutely.
I'm not a that. It's like the language of English is almost so arbitrary that after a while, because it's really not a lot of it is just based on common usage. You're going to drift away from that which is real because the language is arbitrary. And so who
Yeah.
knows? Maybe the English language is absolutely a tool to destabilize societies. I don't know.
Well, I mean, they were aware of this a long time ago too. I mean, the guy who started the orphan trains, or is credited with it, anyways, he wrote a book called Races of the Old World, and this was a book based on Charles Darwin's work, Origin of Species. And what he did is he took Darwin's work and basically attributed, and rather than doing it on biology, he based evolution on language. And he even acknowledges in the introduction of this book, I think it's on like page 9 or something. I wish I would have pulled the quote, but I wasn't planning on talking with this. But what he says is small bodies of men may be forcibly expelled from their region, and with the intention of basically ruining their language so they forget their past. And he just says it right in the beginning of this book. He's like, yeah, this is a way you can just like completely ruin a society. And then he's writing this book as he's doing the orphan trains, and he's telling these Irish kids to forget where they came from and don't
Wow.
remember they're Irish. Yeah, isn't that crazy?
Yeah, if you're disconnected from an ancestral language, you can no longer, or it's very difficult for you to communicate in that way. You can't remember your history, you can't remember your past because the words that past is built on are foreign to you.
Yeah, and Gangs of New York. You've seen this movie, right?
Uh, Maybe, but it was very, very long time ago.
Oh, dude, you should rewatch it again because even in there, the little Irish boy that gets arrested at the very beginning of the movie because his dad was murdered, they send him to Blackwell's Island, and then once he gets out, he's talking to the big gang leader, and he's like, the guy's asking him where he's from, and he's like, I think I'm from this place, but I don't really know. I lost it through my language. I lost the language while I was locked up. That's literally what he
Wow.
says. Yeah. Yeah, so that's just a on point right there. You should watch that movie again. It is such
Always a
an
poke in the eye.
yeah, always right there. It's so interesting. And the more you know about that history, the more like little nuggets there are in that movie. It's so interesting.
Wow.
Yeah, but anyways, we're getting to the top of the first hour here, so I just want to hit our last little point here, which is the form of language. And the form of language is meaning. The form of language can symbolize two parts. The individual is the material aspect of a form. Every physical form manifested is an individual. This is the part of speaking that defines the physical world. The essence is the more metaphysical aspect of the language, as this is that which makes a being what it is. The essence of language is that part that makes it similar to another class, and then individual is the part that makes it different. The form can then be further subdivided. A species is a class made up of individuals that have in common the same specific essence of nature. A genus is a wider class made up of two different species that have in common the same uh, general essence of nature. We are now getting more and more specific about the structure of language being illustrated to us through the hierarchy of nature. You can now you cannot photograph animal, you can only photograph a specific type of animal because that specific animal is an individual. Though
Because
every individual
animal is the category, it's not the specific thing.
exactly. It's the essence. Animal is more of the essence, and then giraffe is the individual. So
Yeah,
though
there's like
every
there's the human, and then there's you, or there's me, or
there's
it's
the
like
human
human is
and
the
then the
category, and then
yeah.
you get like,
Yeah, exactly. The human and then your Christian name would be the individual. Um, so, though every individual has an essence that makes it like the other animals in its class, inside of that essence that connects him to the broader class of species, there are individuating characteristics. Just like every other aspect of life, there are always two things happening at once. So, you're both your essence and you're both your individual at the same time. Kind of like you're both the your Christian and your dead name at the same time until you learn how to control it. So that's all I got, man. You got anything you want to add before we head to the second hour?
nope. I just think that it's worth mentioning that the seven liberal arts, there's seven of them. The first one, anything that comes first is always going to be the most foundational.
Correct.
And the better you get at your base, the more potential you have at getting a bigger peak, right? So
Mm.
if you want to think about knowledge and understanding, and you really want to get up to the heights of, high levels of knowledge and high levels of understanding, you have to build a bigger base. Like if you want to build a bigger pyramid, the base has to be bigger. And so
Hmm.
when we talk about base and foundations, grammar is at the foundation of the seven liberal arts, which means that it really should be understood about word order, the sounds of words, the effect that they have, and their definitions. It's just
Yeah. Yeah, and just to piggyback on top of that, we this is a very general overview of grammar. This is more of the essence of grammar. We're not, and the reason I cut it off here is because when you get into the form and matter of language, that's when we're really getting to the specifics on like, like how adjectives work with nouns and how one should precede the other or how one shouldn't precede the other and the specifics of what Whitestone is talking about. But I thought that was honestly too technical for this first general overview of what grammar is, because I really wanted to capture the essence on why it's important that we should have grammar and why it's important rather people should study grammar. And because we say it all the time, to get smarter, start learning more words. You just have to learn more
yes,
words.
yes,
So
100%.
yeah.
I will. I know we didn't touch on it. This book did, but it does say that one of the earliest written languages for which governing rules were established is Indian Sanskrit. Then it goes on to talk about how Sanskrit was basically like the mother tongue that gave birth to all of the other ones. Now, whether or
Mm.
not I know there's people on different sides of the fence saying that Sanskrit's not as old as they say it is. It's a lot younger. It's an invention. Either way, just so we can understand things here. If Sanskrit truly is the oldest recorded language of a branch of tongues called the Indo-European language family, um, then our own ancestors probably spoke a language very similar to Sanskrit. And one thing I wanted to bring up to
Mm.
people is when you see the word Indo-European, that is a post-World War II politically correct term. And do you know what term Indo-European replaced?
No, I don't.
It replaced the word Aryan. And that
Oh,
let me preface by saying that that is not a socio-political
Aryan
wink
Brotherhood.
wink.
No, no,
It's
it's not
literally a
that.
fact of history that
Right.
the term Aryan was widely used and had a much different interpretation and usage before World War II. And then during World War II, that word Aryan got associated with the you know who's over in Europe. And then after that, that's when, the sociology and the liberal arts.
Well, that's a great point to bridge us to the second hour, actually, because the first thing we're going to talk about in the second hour is etymology. And if
Yep.
people looked up the etymology of Aryan, they would understand all of these points. So
Yes.
if you guys want to start digging deeper, you got to go to True Life Productions or truelifeproduction.com singular, and then you go to hit the Learning Out Loud podcast banner at the top there, and you can go to the members page, sign up for the second hour, and check out the second hour, get all our show notes and stuff there, download the whole video, everything that you need to further your own edification. So, without further ado, we hope to see everybody over there, and never forget to seek truth and honor the Creator above all, and let that be the whole of the law.
That's the important thing here, is that everyone's word should be meant for a use.
And the words that I'm using today are meant to pull down idols within people's temples.
Meaning that I want to destroy
Falsities that they have idolized.
for their entire life.
And just pull those out and sweep them clean. And before that temple,
And get reinfested with a new lie. Give it true life.